Sarah had been trapped in the same cycle for what felt like an eternity. Every time she woke up, she found herself in the same room, surrounded by the same four walls. She would try to break out, but no matter what she did, she always ended up back in that room, starting the cycle all over again. At first, Sarah couldn't remember how she got trapped in this endless cycle. She had no recollection of her past life or how she ended up in this strange place. All she knew was that she had to find a way out. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. Sarah lost track of time as she continued to wake up in the same room, day after day. She tried everything she could think of to break the cycle. She banged on the walls, screamed for help, and even tried to harm herself in hopes of waking up somewhere else. But nothing worked. As the years went by, Sarah's hope began to fade. She resigned herself to the fact that she would be stuck in this cycle forever. But then, something changed. Sarah woke up one morning and felt different. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something had shifted. She got up and looked around the room, but everything was the same as it always was. However, this time, when she tried to open the door, it gave way. Sarah cautiously stepped out into the hallway, half expecting to be pulled back into the room at any moment. But to her surprise, nothing happened. She made her way down the hallway, her heart racing with excitement and fear. She came to a set of stairs and climbed up, not knowing what she would find at the top. When she reached the top, she found herself in a room that was completely unfamiliar. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. The walls were covered in intricate designs, and there was a strange machine in the center of the room. Sarah cautiously approached the machine, not sure what it was or how it could help her. As she got closer, she noticed a button on the side. Without thinking, she pressed it, and the machine began to hum to life. Suddenly, a hologram appeared in front of her. It was a man, and he seemed to be speaking directly to her. "Greetings, Sarah," the hologram said. "I am the creator of this cycle you have been stuck in. I have been watching you for a long time, and I know that you have been trying to break out. I apologize for the pain and confusion I have caused you. But I needed to ensure that you were strong enough to handle what I am about to tell you." The hologram went on to explain that Sarah was part of a grand experiment. The creator had created this cycle to see if humans were capable of breaking free from the constraints of their own minds. Sarah was the last and final participant in this experiment, and she had finally proven herself worthy. The creator then showed Sarah a way out of the cycle, a portal that would take her back to the real world. But before she could go, she had one final task to complete. She had to destroy the machine, thus ending the experiment and freeing herself and the others who were trapped in the cycle. Without hesitation, Sarah followed the instructions and destroyed the machine. As she did, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. She was finally free. The portal opened, and Sarah stepped through, ready to face whatever lay on the other side. As she emerged from the portal, she found herself in a hospital room. She looked around and saw her family and friends gathered around her, tears streaming down their faces. "Sarah!" Her mother cried, rushing to her side. "You're awake." Sarah couldn't believe it. She had been trapped in that cycle for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be awake and alive. She hugged her family tightly, grateful to be back with them. As she looked around the room, she realized that the experiment had not only taught her how to break free from her own mind, but it had also shown her the true value of life and the love of those around her. And for that, she would be forever grateful. The sun was setting over the desolate wasteland, casting a red-orange glow over the abandoned buildings and rusted cars. It had been 3 months since the zombie apocalypse had started, and I was still alive. "My name is Maya, and I am a siren. I use my powers to protect myself and my group of survivors from the infected creatures that roam the land. It all started with the crystals. They started growing from the ground, harmless at first. But as they continued to spread, they started infecting anything they came into contact with. People, animals, even plants. And those infected became mindless zombies, controlled by the crystals. We had no idea where they came from or how to stop them. My group and I were on the move constantly. We had to keep moving to avoid being overrun by the infected. We traveled in our trusty borderland vehicles, scavenging for supplies and weapons along the way. We also used the catch and ride station to print new vehicles, as our old ones would often get destroyed in our attempts to escape the infected. We had just arrived at a new location, a small town that seemed untouched by the infection. We parked our vehicles in the town square and cautiously made our way into the nearest building. It was an old general store, and it seemed to have everything we needed. We spent a couple of hours stocking up on food, water, and ammunition before heading back to our vehicles. As we were about to leave, we heard a loud screeching noise coming from the outskirts of the town. We quickly jumped into our vehicles and drove towards the sound, our guns at the ready. We soon discovered the source of the noise, a giant crystal, pulsating and oozing with infected goo. And surrounding it were dozens of zombies, mindlessly attacking anything in their path. I immediately activated my siren powers, creating a force field around our vehicles to protect us from the zombies. My teammates, Axton and Salvador, started shooting at the zombies, taking them down one by one. I used my powers to throw the infected creatures away from us, giving us a chance to drive away. We raced back to the catch and ride station, where we quickly printed new vehicles and jumped off the nearest cliff to kill ourselves. It may seem extreme, but it was the only way to use the newer station without getting infected. We respawned at the station, uninfected and ready to continue our journey. We drove for hours until we reached a safe location to rest for the night. We set up camp, and I used my powers to create a barrier around us, keeping the infected creatures at bay. We took turns keeping watch throughout the night, making sure we were safe. The next morning, we continued our journey. We came across a bandit camp filled with guns and supplies. We cautiously made our way inside, taking out any bandits that tried to attack us. We managed to find some new guns with extra gimmicks, which would definitely come in handy in our fight against the infected. As we were leaving the camp, we heard a loud roar coming from the distance. We quickly got into our vehicles and drove towards the sound. We soon came face to face with a giant, mutated zombie. It was covered in crystals, and its eyes glowed with an eerie purple light. We knew we couldn't take it down with our guns, so I used my powers to lift it into the air. Axton and Salvador quickly threw grenades at it, causing it to explode into a million pieces. We all let out a sigh of relief, knowing that we had just taken down one of the most dangerous creatures in the wasteland. We continued our journey, facing challenges and obstacles along the way. But we never gave up, always pushing forward and fighting against the infected. We were survivors, and we would do whatever it takes to stay alive in this new, dangerous world. As the sun set once again, we found ourselves at the edge of a cliff. We looked out at the vast landscape in front of us, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and dangers. But for now, we were safe. And that's all that mattered in this borderland universe. My name is Alex, and I've been surviving in this zombie-infested world for the past 2 years. It's been tough, but I've managed to make it this far. People always ask me how I've been able to survive for so long, and honestly, I'm not sure myself. Maybe it's because I don't take this apocalypse as seriously as others do. I was never one to follow the rules and conform to society's expectations. So when the world went to hell and the dead started to rise, I didn't panic like everyone else. Instead, I saw it as an opportunity to break free from the mundane life I was living before. No more 9-to-5 job, no more bills to pay, no more responsibilities. Just me and the open road. I've been on the move ever since, traveling across the country in my trusty old pickup truck. I've come across some interesting characters along the way, but I prefer to travel alone. It's easier that way, no one to slow me down or get in my way. Plus, I don't have to worry about anyone else's safety, but my own. But today, as I was driving down a deserted highway, I came across a group of survivors who were in desperate need of help. They were stranded on the side of the road, their car broken down and surrounded by a horde of zombies. Without hesitation, I pulled over and got out of my truck. Need a ride? I shouted to them as I grabbed my trusty baseball bat from the back of my truck. They looked at me with a mix of surprise and relief. Yes, please. One of them yelled back. I quickly took care of the zombies with a few swings of my bat and helped the survivors load their belongings into my truck. They introduced themselves as Sarah, Mark, and their two kids, Emily and Jake. They had been on the road for weeks trying to find a safe place to call home. As we drove, they told me their story and how they had lost everything when the outbreak first started. They were just like any other family, trying to survive in a world that had turned against them. But unlike most people, they still held on to the hope of finding a safe haven. I couldn't help but admire their determination and resilience. They reminded me that there was still some good left in this world, even in the midst of all the chaos and destruction. We traveled together for a few days, and I have to admit, it was nice having some company for a change. We talked and laughed, sharing stories and making plans for the future. They even convinced me to let my guard down a little and enjoy the simple things in life, like a warm meal and a hot shower. But as much as I enjoyed their company, I knew I couldn't stay with them forever. I was a lone wolf, and I needed to keep moving. So when we reached a safe zone, I bid them farewell and continued on my journey. As I drove away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. I had grown attached to this family in such a short amount of time, and it pained me to leave them behind. But I knew that they would be safe in the hands of the community, and that was all that mattered. I continued my road trip, not knowing where it would lead me next. But one thing was for sure, I would never forget the family that taught me that, even in the darkest of times, there is still hope and goodness in this world. And for that, I am forever grateful. My name is Max, and I've been roaming the wasteland for as long as I can remember. I've seen some crazy things out here, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened on the road trip with my buddies, Jake and Mia. We were cruising down the old highway in our trusty old car, the three of us singing along to the radio and joking around. We didn't have a destination in mind, just driving to see where the road would take us. Suddenly, we came across a group of raiders attacking a small settlement. Now, normally we would have just kept driving, but Mia saw a kid in danger and she couldn't just leave him there. Jake and I couldn't argue with that, so we jumped out of the car and ran towards the settlement. The raiders were no match for the three of us. Jake was a skilled marksman, Mia was a master with her machete, and I had my trusty shotgun. We took them down with ease and saved the settlement. The grateful settlers invited us to stay for the night, and we gladly accepted. They had a feast prepared for us, and we spent the evening swapping stories and sharing laughs. It was a nice change of pace from our usual routine of scavenging and fighting for survival. The next morning, we were getting ready to hit the road again when one of the settlers approached us with a problem. Their water supply had been contaminated and they didn't have the means to purify it. They asked if we could help, and being the good Samaritans that we are, we agreed to help. We headed to the nearest town, which happened to be controlled by a group of raiders. We knew we were in for a fight, but we were determined to help the settlers. As expected, the raiders put up a tough fight. Jake and Mia took care of the ones on the ground while I climbed up to the water tower to fix the contamination. It was a close call, but we managed to defeat the raiders and purify the water. The grateful settlers couldn't thank us enough. They offered us a reward, but we declined. We were just happy to help. However, they did insist on giving us some supplies for our journey. We accepted and continued on our road trip. As we drove, we couldn't help but reflect on the events of the past couple of days. We had never gone out of our way to help others before, but it felt good. We realized that maybe there was more to life in the wasteland than just surviving. We continued our journey, coming across more settlements in need of help. We didn't hesitate to lend a hand, and our reputation as the road trip heroes began to spread. Eventually, we reached the coast and decided to settle down in a small fishing village. We used the skills we had acquired during our road trip to help the villagers and make a comfortable living for ourselves. Looking back, I couldn't believe how far we had come. We went from being three friends on a road trip to becoming heroes in the wasteland. And it all started with a simple act of kindness. So here we are, living out our days in peace and contentment. But every now and then, we still pack up our car and hit the road, taking on whatever challenges and adventures come our way. Because in this crazy world, sometimes all you need is a little road trip with your friends to remind you of what truly matters. The survivors huddled together in their makeshift shelter, the sound of moans and shuffling feet echoing outside. They all wore masks made from scraps of fabric and filters scavenged from abandoned buildings. It was the only way to protect themselves from the spores that had caused the zombie apocalypse. Maggie, the leader of the group, paced back and forth, her eyes constantly scanning the room. She was a tough woman with a sharp tongue and a no-nonsense attitude. But beneath her tough exterior, she cared deeply for her fellow survivors. What are we going to do now? Asked Jake, a young man with a shock of curly hair and a nervous disposition. Maggie sighed and stopped pacing, turning to face the group. We need to find a new place to stay. This building won't hold up for much longer. But where are we going to go? Asked Lily, a kind-hearted woman who always had a smile on her face, even in the face of the apocalypse. We'll figure it out, Maggie said, her voice firm. But first, we need to gather supplies. The group set out in search of food and water, their masks securely in place. They moved silently through the streets, avoiding the zombies as best they could. It was a constant struggle to survive in this new world, but they were determined to make it through. As they were looting an abandoned store, they heard a loud crash outside. They cautiously peeked out the window and saw a group of survivors being attacked by a horde of zombies. We have to help them, Lily said, her eyes wide with fear. Maggie hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks. But she couldn't turn her back on fellow survivors. Get the supplies and let's go. They quickly grabbed as much as they could carry and rushed outside to help. Maggie took out her trusty axe and started hacking away at the zombies, while Jake and Lily provided cover fire with their guns. The other survivors, a man named Mark and his teenage daughter Sarah, joined in the fight. Together, they were able to fend off the zombies and save the other group. Thank you, the other group's leader, a man named Ben, said with relief. We thought we were done for. We all have to stick together in this new world, Maggie replied, offering her hand to shake. Ben took her hand and introduced his group, which included his wife Karen and their two young children, Max and Ava. They were a family of farmers who had been forced to flee their home when the infection reached their town. Can we join your group? Ben asked, desperation evident in his voice. Maggie hesitated for a moment, then nodded. We can use all the help we can get. The two groups merged together, sharing supplies, skills, and stories. They found a new place to call home, an old warehouse that they fortified as best they could. They were a ragtag group of survivors, but they had each other, and that was all that mattered. As the months passed, the survivors faced new challenges and hardships. They lost members of their group to zombie attacks and sickness. But they also gained new members, including a doctor named Ryan who had a knack for finding medicine and a young girl named Emily who had been separated from her family. Through it all, they stuck together, relying on each other for support and protection. They became a family, bound by their shared experiences and struggles. One day, as they sat around a campfire, Lily looked around at her fellow survivors and smiled. We've come a long way since that first day we met. We wouldn't have made it this far without each other, Maggie replied, her eyes scanning the faces of her group. They all nodded in agreement, the fire crackling in the background. In this new world, they had found something they never thought possible, a sense of belonging and purpose. And together, they would continue to fight for survival, no matter what challenges came their way.